You know Gray Bar for electrical parts, but there's one more thing you may not be thinking of us for that can help maximize your next project's total value. Our pre-project planning services are designed to help you win the bid, save on labor costs, and keep your installers productive across your entire build. The sooner you call us, the better. Because when we're there from the beginning, we can anticipate your needs and help you solve problems before they become problems. Yep, Gray Bar does that.
The whole world is obsessed with Serial and Making a Murderer and the 75 different Law & Order and CSI shows that are on TV. So this latest edition of the Minor League Baseball, the Show Before the Show podcast, is all going to be Sam Dykstra telling us about jury duty. Hi, Sam.
Hi. I guess this is going to be disappointing because I legally cannot say.
Oh, come on!
I know.
Law.
I've been sworn, and I enjoy my free living, and I don't want to be,
what a ripoff.
Be thrown into jail myself for saying too many details about cases and whatnot. So.
What a champ, though, Sam Dykstra is on jury duty all week this week and still find a time to record the 42nd edition, the Jackie Robinson edition of the Show Before the Show podcast. How's it been? Can you tell us how it's been at least?
It's been interesting.
Yeah.
I'll say that much.
Okay.
And just to update people on what's happened since the last podcast for our loyal listeners. I think we joked last week. We were like, we did it on Wednesday because Sam has to pop in on Thursday for jury duty, but he'll be back.
Yeah,
well,
that's what we thought.
I got assigned to a 2-week grand jury, so I'm still in the midst of that, and I will still be in the midst when we tape next week's show as well. So
we thought it was going to be like Sam would show up, it'd be like traffic court, it would take 2 hours.
Or you just show up and maybe you report, maybe you get added to a jury, maybe you don't. The good news is I did not get added to a 60-day jury. Which was a possibility. So only these 2 weeks, and then I don't have to serve for 8 years.
That would have been ridiculous. 8 years? You get 2 weeks and then 8 years off.
Yeah.
That's pretty solid. That's a good trade.
Proud to do my civic duty during the off-season.
That's a pretty good trade.
Right. Yeah, I'll take it.
I feel like I would do that. Hey, so welcome in. It's the 42nd episode of the Minor League Baseball podcast, the Show Before the Show. I'm Tyler. He's Sam. We got a lot of stuff coming up for you today. As always, you can rate and subscribe and review the Show Before the Show podcast on iTunes. You can also find us at MILB.com. You can find RSS feeds and all the other pertinent information for non-iOS users. But if you do listen to the Show Before the Show on your iPad, your iPhone, your MacBook Pro, whatever it is. Give us a rating, give us a review. We've been looking for some new ones of those for a while, and they're all good. The ones that we get are all good. Just we need some more. So head on over and give us some more of those whenever you get a chance. And thank you again for tuning into in the doldrums of January. We're like in that stretch where it's like, ugh, man, it's gray. Everything's dead outside. It's like the worst. January and February are the worst.
Yeah, there's a big storm coming.
Yeah, you guys are going to get hammered.
Right. I don't want to say finally because I think I said there
True.
was no storms coming last January, and then it was a horrid winter. So, yeah, we're getting to the point where the snow is going to fall, and then there's going to be no light for 2 months. But once we get through that, there will be baseball.
At least, yeah, exactly. Baseball is the candle on the other end of that tunnel, and so we're getting closer, ever closer. Minor leaguers report in about 5 or 6 weeks or so. Major leaguers report in less than a month, so get excited. Pitchers and catchers reporting second and third week in February. Get pumped. It's very close. So let's dive in. 3 strikes coming up first this week. Next, after this 3-strike segment, we are going to talk a little bit about some of the initial top 10 prospect releases that the MLB pipeline guys have put out. Left-handed pitcher, right-handed pitcher, and catcher are already out. So we'll discuss those a little bit as well. And then Kelsie Heneghan will join the show, one of our fearless writers, members of this staff at MILB.com, talking about a really cool story that she put together on Houston Astros number 16 prospect, right-handed pitcher Chris Devenski. So we got a really good conversation with Kelsie coming up on that. That story is up on the site now as well. But let's get started with some relatively big breaking news in the world of minor league baseball. Today it became official. After 19 seasons, there will be no more Venezuelan Summer League. One of the lowest levels under the minor league baseball umbrella will be shuttered for 2016. That league has been, I don't want to say falling apart, but it's been shrinking for a while for a ton of different reasons. None of them basically are baseball related, but Venezuela has been thrown into a whole lot of turmoil in recent seasons. The league had just 4 teams last year after the Seattle Mariners pulled their team ahead of 2015. Ahead of 2016, the Chicago Cubs have decided to pull their affiliate out of the VSL, so there will be no VSL in 2016. This doesn't have a huge impact on American MILB fans because the product you're going to get is going to be the exact same. And even with the lower level organization teams, Short C, the Pioneer League, the Appalachian League, those leagues more than likely not really going to see a huge influx of guys from these VSL teams. But what it will affect are the Dominican Summer League teams and the Gulf Coast League teams, and to an extent some of the Arizona League teams, I would imagine, as well. But this is kind of the closing of an era, and it's sad to see the way that this has turned down for Venezuela.
Yeah, and one thing I kind of keep coming back to when I've been thinking about this today is just the effect this will have on some of the kids. I mean, the Venezuelan League, the Dominican League, same way, is that it's a great way of a lot of these kids get signed, some for very, very little money, some for decently big money, but it's a good way of getting them into pro ball, getting them wearing the Phillies, the Rays, the Tigers uniforms, and feeling comfortable in their own land. They know the area, they know the climate, they know all of that stuff, they know the currency. So for the Venezuelan kids, and we know that there's been tons of really, really good Venezuelan players over the years: Miguel Cabrera, Felix Hernandez, Babe Abreu, Johan Santana. The list kind of goes on and on. For the next generation of Venezuelan kids, they're going to have to immediately go elsewhere. And this is an opportunity that they just won't have anymore. That's not that's true of a lot of kids, all around the world. Colombia, Panama, they never had minor league baseball leagues quite like the kids in Venezuela did. But this was an opportunity that's kind of gone by the wayside. They, like you said, Tyler, they'll get their chances. They'll go to the Dominican leagues or Gulf Coast and Arizona leagues. So they'll have their chances, but it just won't be in their homeland.
And that's kind of what it comes down to. And Tim Brunswick, who is minor league baseball's vice president for baseball and business operations, said, quote, "With the gradual departure of teams from the VSL in recent years and the fact that only 3 clubs plan to field teams in the league this year, the decision was made to suspend operations of the Venezuelan Summer League for the 2016 season. Several clubs that were formerly in the VSL will now field an extra team in the Dominican Summer League or Gulf Coast League to provide opportunities for their players to play. It's my understanding that most clubs will continue to operate academies in Scout Venezuela, but there will not be a league in Venezuela this summer," end quote. That's kind of what it comes down to. These guys are not going to be losing the opportunity, but if you're 16 years old and you're getting your first taste of pro ball, do you want to do it on a several-hour plane trip to go play in the Dominican Republic, come play in the U.S., or would it be easier for you, easier for your family to play at home? I mean, I think in a perfect world, nobody would have wanted to shutter the VSL, but so much has gone on in Venezuela, and according to this story, which is from our own Danny Wild, really the key issues have been inflation, crime, corruption, and food shortages especially. There's been some political upheaval. There was a big election just a couple of months ago in which people, I guess, sort of started feeling like maybe the paradigm was going to shift, but that's been a very tumultuous country for a very long time. And I think one of the interesting things that comes out of this is arguably baseball infrastructure is going to be shrinking when the interest in baseball is going to be expanding. And this is a story I read, I want to say a couple of years ago now, I believe by Ben Badler from Baseball America, who wrote that a lot of the growing thought in Venezuelan baseball is kids aren't really getting ahead by going to school, by going to college in Venezuela. You're not just getting out, graduating, getting a good job, and making something of yourself. That's not the way it's been there for the last several years. So with that, there seems to be a lot more interest in a country that used to formally emphasize those things. Now it seems like there's a lot more emphasis on If you have athletic talent, pursue it. You can get a lot of money to leave the country and go play in the United States or go play elsewhere internationally. You can support a family. You can bring a family to wherever you are. So it's a little bit weird in that maybe there's going to be an increased flux of very talented Venezuelan kids toward playing baseball, trying to play at a higher level. And now all of a sudden they may not have the exact same resources going forward to try to get those careers started. So it's definitely not a perfect world situation. It's not something minor league baseball would have wanted to do in a much better situation, but it is going to really change the dynamic for how guys get into professional ball, especially from Venezuela. But like you said, it'll affect kids from Panama, kids from Colombia, from other areas of that region of Latin America.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to stress too is that I said this is kind of disappointing for the kids, but that doesn't mean it's not an understandable move. I mean, you talked about all the problems that Venezuela has had recently, and you mentioned Danny's story. Danny's story brings up how Wilson Ramos was abducted, in front of his mother's house in Venezuela, and there's all this stuff that's gone on there, just in terms of safety, in terms of the economy. You can see why teams are leaving, and that's what's led to all the rest. So I think teams just feel safer about their prospects, about people in their system, about the infrastructure that they would be building in places like the Dominican or Florida, Arizona, that kind of stuff. So as disappointing as the move is, that doesn't mean it's not understandable, which I think this is as well.
And it's definitely not something that's just been limited to the last few years either. In September 2004, Uguet Urbina's mother was kidnapped. People might remember that back when he was with, I believe at the time, Oogie was with the Detroit Tigers, I want to say. But his mother was kidnapped. His family didn't pay a ransom. She was later rescued. But it's something that's been going on for a long time. And so you hope that, eventually down the road we'll see a reestablishment of that league. And that something like that would not be uncommon in a circumstance like this. But one of the end of an era, one of the eras coming to a close in Latin American baseball due to some things that are very much out of the control of the baseball world. By the way, that does not affect the LVBP. If you've ever followed off-season baseball, the Venezuelan Professional Baseball League, that's kind of their main league, and that is a winter league from the Northern Hemisphere perspective. It's an off-season league, and that's where a lot of those guys go to play over the off-season. A lot of really talented Venezuelan ball players. That's not affected by this, so just a clarification there. Strike two. Prospect projections continue. Despite grand jury assignments, Sam Dykstra still just dropping prospect projections. National League East, take it away.
Yeah, so what I wanted to focus on for this one, the kind of obvious rookie projection that I think a lot of people were looking for in this is a guy who I think might be the leading contender for NL Rookie of the Year. It's between him and probably Corey Seager, just off the bat. It's Steven Matz in the Mets system. No surprise there that Steamer really likes his projections for next year. They got him for a 3.59 ERA, 8.8 strikeouts per 9 innings, and a 3 WAR over 200 innings. I think the Mets would be very happy with that. Out of their top prospect, out of one of the top left-handed pitching prospects in the game, a guy who pitched in the postseason last year. Very exciting part of that really young Mets rotation going forward, excluding Bartolo Colon, obviously the very not young member of that rotation, at least to start until Zach Wheeler gets healthy. But Mets, the projections like him to be just as good next year as I think we were all thinking. But the more interesting one for me, and the thing I kind of led this with, was how are the Nats going to handle Trey Turner and the shortstop position going into what is obviously his first full year with the Nationals. He was involved in that 3-team trade between the Rays, Nationals, and Padres last offseason, couldn't be moved until June because of a now defunct rule about trading players in their draft years. So now, he tore up between, Double-A San Antonio, played at Double-A Harrisburg and Triple-A Syracuse last year, got a decently long cup of coffee with the Nationals at the end of the last year, but didn't get that regular playing time at short or second. They wanted to play him in the middle of the infield. So going forward for next year, Steamer actually does think he'll do very well. One thing we know about Turner, he's very fast. I think he's got a 75 grade on the 2080 scale for his run tool. Steamer has him for 23 steals over a full season. They have him for a 2.2 WAR And the interesting note about that WAR is that it is higher than either Danny Espinosa or Stephen Drew, two much more veteran members of the Nationals infield, who are kind of competing for that shortstop job. Talking to some people in the national system, I think they're all excited for what they have in Turner. All of them said he's going to be part of the competition come this spring. They definitely want him to go and take that opportunity, and he'll get the chance to win the major league spot. I think the most likely thing that is going to happen is he's probably going to be sent back to Syracuse to start the year, just because in terms of veteran moves, and he has options left, obviously. So that'll be easy. It'll be easier to get him playing time there. He'll be the Chiefs' #1 starting shortstop no matter what. So Turner is definitely one to watch this spring in terms of that battle at the shortstop position for the Nationals. The projection system again that we use likes him more than Danny Espinosa or Stephen Drew, but we'll have to see what first year Nationals manager Dusty Baker thinks in that debate when he gets to see all those guys in the same spot.
That division, I mean, for a while has felt down, but there is a whole lot of excitement in that division for the next 5 years or so. I mean, that right now, if you had to name, I mean, obviously the NL Central, we know how loaded that is, and there's a lot of talent, a lot of other systems across baseball, but there may not be a better, if you had to rank division by division, I don't think anybody has brighter futures than the 5 teams in the NL East combined collectively.
Yeah, and well, the interesting thing for me, at least from our perspective, is that yes, we have the Mets and the Nationals, who are both very, very good teams, I think, right now. Certainly have playoff aspirations, both of which can reasonably believe that they have a chance to compete for a World Series title this year. But then looking at this from a prospects point of view, you also have the Braves and the Phillies in that as well. So going through these projections, it just makes it so interesting to think, what would J.P. Crawford do if he was in the majors this whole year? What about Mark Appel versus Jake Thompson? What about Jorge Alfaro in his first full year? So there's a lot to chew on in terms of just young talent in this division as well. It's not just, I think the NL Central is very top heavy, between the Cubs, the Pirates, and the Cardinals. Those are all interesting teams, less interesting systems. This NL East has a good mix of that both, I think.
Prospect projections continuing to roll out over the next, what'll that be, 4 weeks now?
Yep. So this week coming up is AL Central. So everybody, AL Central teams can have that to look forward to. Specifically the Twins. We like talking about the Twin system a lot because there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of major league ready talent. So that'll be, I think, the focus of this one coming up next Monday.
So keep an eye out for those, which will be coming out on Mondays for the next 4 weeks, leading us up to pitchers and catchers reporting for spring training. And we'll get to Strike 3, which is sort of an off-the-field story, which is about the field itself. There's been a bad drought in California, as we know, for years now. About 5 years, entering the 5th year now of a statewide drought is the Golden State. And that has affected pretty much every walk of life in California. And baseball teams, by far, are not removed from that. I mean, that's a pretty obvious thing that is cut into the way that you would ordinarily operate an organization if you're a minor league baseball team and a major league baseball team for that matter. And our own Josh Jackson put together a really, really good, interesting story on what California teams are doing to really battle this drought, but also embrace the idea of being good stewards, of being conservationists, of being members of the community who are not irresponsible in the way they handle this drought. This is a really cool story, and it's one of those things, we'll talk about this with Kelsie later, but I love this time of year from our perspective because we get to branch out and do so many cool ideas for stories, so many creative things. Anything that we think of that we know we can make into a story, we pretty much get the green light to go for it. And this is one of the neatest ideas for a story that I would never have really thought about, diving into the way that teams are able to not just deal with this, but try to thrive on a very difficult situation.
Yeah, because, I mean, think about when you think of a baseball diamond, the first thing you think of is probably just green, as far as you can see. And then when, as you mentioned, the problem with California is just they've had so much drought. They've had executive orders from the governor saying how much water you're allowed to use. We were joking before when we were coming up with, where we were deciding that we were going to talk about this story. There was even Tom Selleck got in trouble for, bringing water over county lines. It was, it's been in the news for a while now. But now we get to kind of focus on what that specifically means for minor league teams. And I really like this tidbit that Josh included about Fresno. Fresno Grizzlies, they're part of California. They're in the Central Valley. But to those who don't understand, somebody like me necessarily, reading the story, I didn't know this off the top of my head. Central Valley is kind of the agricultural center of, such a big state like California. So what the Grizzlies general manager told Josh, I'll just read it here for you. A big chunk of our fan base, our corporate sponsors, our season ticket holders, if they're not farmers or in an ag-related business, they're close to people who are. In our market, we've known we needed to be extra conscious of water usage. Being kind of the fruit basket of America, we've had to be mindful that something that has a big impact, if not the biggest in the Central Valley, is water shortages. We didn't want to contribute to that. So it's not only just, are we going to be able to water the field? It's, are we shoving it in the faces of our fans that we're using all this water? There's so much layers to this in terms of just keeping the grass green.
And it's not something that I think is going to get much better. I mean, droughts break, and eventually it's been a pretty wet winter in a lot of parts of California, and that helps. But I don't think it's a situation where we're going to look back a few years from now and think, oh, man, we're, for lack of a better term, we're all just swimming in the water we get to use for all these fields. So it's good for these teams to be able to adapt and realize that, maybe this is the way it's going to be for a while. What's really interesting in Josh's story is the different modes of feedback that groundskeepers are able to get from things that they can use, whether it's irrigation systems or just the kind of the way that they, analyze a field and how it's doing in a given time. But even, from what time of day it is, what the temperature is outside, what the wind conditions are like, what makes it the best time of day to water a field. It's really cool. It's a really interesting story. So it's up now on MILB.com. Really, really interesting stuff from Josh Jackson. And as always, interesting stuff from Josh Jackson. One of the best. And another one of the best, which we have coming up a little bit later on, is Kelsie Heneghan. We'll get to her story about Chris Devenski. But before that, we're going to talk a little top 10, some of the early picks of the best prospects of baseball from MLB Pipeline next. Our good pals over at MLB Pipeline are getting set for 2016 with some of the most highly anticipated work that they do all year, which is the release of the top 10 prospects at every position throughout minor league baseball. Got things started this week with the list of right-handed pitchers, followed by left-handed pitchers, followed by catchers. And we're going to start, Sam, with the right-handed hurlers from the MLB Pipeline. Guys, let's run through the top 10 very quickly. Number one, no surprise, is Lucas Giolito.
Right. Friend of the podcast.
All world everything. Friend of the podcast, Lucas Giolito of the Washington Nationals organization. Number two is Tyler Glasnow, right-hander in the Pittsburgh Pirates system. And it's Alex Reyes in the St. Louis Cardinals. Jose Barrios of the Minnesota Twins. Jose De Leon, the right-hander in the Los Angeles Dodgers system. John Gray, the Colorado Rockies righty. Robert Stevenson, the former Louisville Bat, a Cincinnati Reds right-hander, who is one of the interesting guys on this list. And we'll kind of talk about, the guys that really stand out to us in this. Dylan Tate, a very young one, and the Texas Rangers organization, comes in 8th. He was the 4th overall pick last year. Carson Fulmer was the 8th overall pick last year in the White Sox system. He's number 9. And Anderson Espinoza, another young guy, just 17 years old, signed in 2014 by the Red Sox. He's number 10. Who stands out to you on this list?
Yeah, I'll actually start there at the bottom just because he is so young. And Anderson Espinoza did a tool shed on him last year just because he caught my eye, and there were so many people talking about him lighting up the gun, between the DSL, made the jump to the GCL last year as a teenager. We were talking earlier in the show about, you want to find comfort for guys while they're so young. This was a guy who just turned 17 in March, but the Red Sox sent him from his native land of Venezuela, put him in the DSL, which looked really, really good in a very short time there, made 4 starts there, struck out 21 batters in 15 innings, and they decided, you know what, this teenager, this young kid, he's ready for stateside. I mean, he's ready to make the jump to the Gulf Coast League. Pitched really, really well there. 10 starts, 40 innings, 40 strikeouts, 0.68 ERA. I mean, obviously this is kind of a smaller sample, only pitched about 4 innings a start, but this was a guy who, being so young, his fastball was just so electric, and he didn't really need to use too many other pitches, just being at those lower levels. So it's exciting to see a guy who's this young, this low. Part of that is just ceiling. I mean, a lot of what it is with Espinoza at this point is just straight projection. He's 6 feet, 160. So he's not very tall. He's not going to get too much taller than that. He might have to grow out a little bit. Everybody likes to use the Pedro comp because he's wearing Red Sox across his chest and he's kind of small. We'll see how that works out. You hate to put that on a 17-year-old. Hey, your comp is a Hall of Fame pitcher.
And all-world everything.
Yeah, one of the most beloved pitchers of the last 20, 30 years. But, that's the easy comp for him. Or, easy, lazy, whatever you want to use there. But it is exciting to see him put up in that same top 10 with guys, we've known for years now. In Giolito, Glasnow, Reyes, Berrios, down the list you already mentioned. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here. He certainly could have rocket fuel. I mean, if he does really well, I think they're going to send him to Greenville to start this year, get him full season ball, kind of do what they did with Rafael Devers last year. Obviously different position being a pitcher, but really limit his innings. But he seems ready for full season ball. If he can perform really well there, we'll be talking about him as a top 5 right-handed pitcher at the end of the year, right-handed pitching prospect at the end of the year, rather than just number 10.
One of the guys who stands out to me is, and I mean, there are guys on this list who are either major league commodities, basically proven major league commodities in the offing or not. I mean, we know Lucas Giolito and Tyler Glasnow are really knocking on the doorstep. Jose Berrios is the same way. I really like Dylan Tate, who was a Texas Rangers first-round pick last year, 4th overall. He's 21 years old. He kind of exploded onto the scene as a junior after moving into the rotation at UC Santa Barbara. Before that, really, I think was kind of a lesser-known skill set. He was a bullpen guy, was really, really good in relief for UC Santa Barbara, pitched for the U.S. Collegiate National Team as a sophomore. But when he got in the rotation as a junior, that's when it really looked like he was going to be able to make some noise. Really, really good fastball, which can get to 98 miles an hour. Good slider, 85 to 89, according to MLB Pipeline. But what I like about him was jumps right in, makes 6 starts, doesn't throw a ton of innings, but gets that first professional experience under his belt, and then gets into the offseason resting, ready to go for his first full pro season. I love seeing that from guys who come out of the draft, when you can come right in, sign, get started, get the experience under your belt, and then all of a sudden shut it down. It's a long college season. He only threw 9 total professional innings. He actually made 6 starts, only threw 9 innings across 2 levels. He pitched for Spokane in the Northwest League and for Hickory in the South Atlantic League. He only goes 9 total innings, but he only gives up 3 hits, ERA of 1 even, only gave up a single run, struck out 8, walked 3. I really like Dylan Tate because Texas seems so committed to making sure they brought him in. He's the 4th overall pick, got a boatload of money to get signed. I feel like he could rise pretty quickly, similarly to what he did in college, where it seems like just all of a sudden one day he was one of the guys you talked about as one of the best talents in the country collegiately. I really like that about him. I feel like not many people know his name right now, but soon he's going to be one of the guys you talk about that way.
Yeah, and the interesting thing to see will be how they kind of handle his workload. I mean, you mentioned 2 years ago he was just a reliever. This year makes the move to the starting rotation with the Gauchos. What's going to happen now? Now they're going to try to add on even more innings. What exactly are they going to do with him to make sure he doesn't overthrow his arm, his shoulder, elbow, all those issues we always talk about with pitching injuries? They certainly have a good commodity on their hands. How they use him, I'm sure it's going to be cautiously. You mentioned all the money they've invested in him, the high pick they've invested in him. But there's so much going on with just Tate alone. His stuff certainly is exciting, so we'll see what happens with him once he really sinks his teeth into pro ball.
Left-handed pitchers, Sam, 1 through 10, they look like this. Julio Urias, not a question there, number 1 or number 2. You knew he was going to be at the top of the list. You knew Blake Snell was going to be at the top of the list as well. Urias with the Dodgers, Snell with the Rays. He is number 2. Then it's Steven Matz, who is as close to being a graduated prospect as anybody on this list, or any of these lists will be. Sean Newcomb in the now Brave system, formerly of the Angels. He's at number 4. Tyler Jay, another really, really young kid, and a draft selection just a couple of picks behind the 4th overall pick, Dylan Tate. Tyler Jay went 6th overall to the Twins. Josh Hader in the Milwaukee Brewers organization, spent last season with Double-A Biloxi. Cody Reed, another starter in the Red system. Ironically, he ranks 7th there from left-handed pitching prospects. Robert Stevenson in the Red system ranked number 7 for right-handed prospects. Sean Manaea, now with the Oakland Athletics, of course, the former first-round pick of the Kansas City Royals. Amir Garrett had a real big breakout 2015 in the Red system, and Colby Allard in the Braves system, yet another 2015 draft pick. Lefties, who do you like?
Yeah, for me, just looking at this list, I think the top 4 are very, very good, and I think there's a severe drop-off from there. I mean, you're talking about a group of Urias, Snell, Matz, and Newcomb. I think if you ranked any of those 4 in any order, I don't know if I'd have too big a problem. I mean, we can nitpick here and there. Snell in front of Matz is an interesting move there for me. I just think you talked before, Matz, already has that major league experience, pitched very well for the Mets last year, has pitched very well at all levels. Has that AAA track record. Snell looked great last year. Obviously, was the minor league pitcher of the year by any number of media, including ourselves. And then Newcomb has his walk issues, but obviously electric stuff, and just racked up strikeouts in his first year. And Urias, we've been talking about for a while now, probably has the highest ceiling of this group, and is the youngest amongst that 4. I think if you put any of those 4 in any order, it would have been okay. I might make the argument for Matz first, just because I really like having major league experience, having successful major league experience, and that's something he's done over the others. His ceiling might not be as high as Urias, but just what he's done so far, I would feel more solid about having him in an organization than necessarily Urias, but higher ceilings normally win out on these lists, and I think that's kind of how it's worked here.
Before I get to my favorite lefties, I just want to know, what is Julio going to do on August 12th of this year? He turns 20.
I thought this the other day. I'll let you finish this up, but I
his
thought
Twitter handle is @theteenager7. Because that's how we've all known him for so long. Like, oh, you got to see this teenager in the Dodger system, this teenager, young teen here, 17 years old, whatever it is. He's going to be 20 soon.
Well, he's probably just going to make it millennial 7, I guess. I don't know.
The I
get all that
7, whatever
yeah, Dodgers millennial 7.
Yeah, I agree with the top 4, and it's pretty. When you look at Steven Matz's numbers, you really realize how good he was at basically every stop last year, or at least the 2 that really mattered with Las Vegas and with the Mets at the major league level. Snell and Urias, you can't go wrong with either of those guys. And Newcomb, I'm going to be very anxious to see what he does in a new system, especially with the way we know the Braves can develop arms. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. The guy who I have an eye on this list is Sean Manaea. And I think that he, in large part, was kind of knocked down over the last couple of seasons because he did not just break out the way that most people expected him to. He was a competitive balance pick for the Royals, the 34th overall selection back in 2013. Came out of Indiana State. Looked like he was going to go maybe number 1 overall, and then had a hip injury, partially torn labrum, I think it was, at Indiana State in his junior season. Fell to 34th overall, got to the Royals, but he just never dominated, and then battled injuries the beginning of 2015, had an abdominal strain, a groin strain, was really good after he went to Oakland in the trade in July for Double-A Midland in the Texas League, 6-0 record, 1.90 ERA. That was fantastic. But what I liked about Sean Manaea was how well he did in the Arizona Fall League, and I talked to him when I was down in Phoenix, and he said the thing that he was testing out in the AFL was a new grip on his changeup, and that was, out of all of his offerings, that was his lowest graded one, a 65 graded fastball, 55 slider, and a 50 changeup. And he said he knew he was going to have to take some lumps with it, but he really felt confident about the fact that once he got it down, he would have a lot more confidence in that pitch. To be a successful major league starter, you need to have that effective 3-pitch or more mix. You can't go out there with a good fastball or a great fastball, a good slider, and a changeup that everybody knows you're not going to offer, you're not even really going to show. You have to have that third dimension. That's what excites me about Sean Manaea. If I'm an A's fan looking for something to be pumped up about for his career, I think that's what gets me to the level where, yeah, we got a first-round pick, a guy who was at one time a candidate to go first overall. I just feel like that is the final piece of the puzzle to come into line for him. Now, is he a frontline Major League starter? I don't know. I don't think so. He's probably more of a mid-rotation guy, but I really like that about Manaea, that he seems open to doing whatever it takes to get himself to what people really forecasted for him. And not only that, phenomenal head of hair. Did you see the thing when he was at I believe he was at the rookie business development, the thing that Major League Baseball put on for players a couple of weeks ago, and the hair now is like, he's got like a helmet, like this giant mass of curly, it's amazing.
Well, oh, yeah, no, I'm looking at it now. That looks like a wig.
It's incredible. I know! It looks like a 70s superhero.
Right. That's kind of the danger of baseball players wearing hats. Is that in some cases, I wish that they didn't have to, because I think seeing their hair flow...
We can appreciate it.
Bryce Harper's one of those people. I think if his hair flew...
Absolutely.
We would all be more appreciative, and baseball might get slightly higher ratings. But with Sean Manaea and that hair on the mound, that would be something.
There's not much as intimidating as that.
Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe it's harder to track the ball because you're just focusing on his follicles.
Amir Garrett, another guy I think we both really like. He comes in number 9 on this list. Fantastic season last year, 2.44 ERA and 140 and a third innings over 26 starts for Class A Advanced Dayton. So keep an eye on Amir Garrett as well. And last but not least, the most recently released of the top 10 the top 10 prospects by position is catching prospects going into the 2016 season. And here they are. Wilson Contreras leads things off, the Cubs prospect. Then it's Gary Sanchez. We talked a little bit about Gary Sanchez in the prospect projections conversation last week in the Yankee system. Jorge Alfaro, who's going to be an interesting guy to talk about because we didn't see much of him last year because of an injury in June, but a very, very exciting talent. Reese McGuire, Pittsburgh Pirates prospect, friend of the podcast. Tyler Stevenson in the Reds organization. Elias Diaz, number 6 in the Pirates system. Dom Nunez in the Rockies system. Jacob Nottingham. We had a Q&A with Jacob that Kelsie did, the now A's prospect, formerly an Astros prospect. He checks in at number 8. Max Pentecost, who is another one who we have not seen a lot about in his professional career so far. He's only played 25 games, and he still comes in as the number 9 ranked catching prospect in baseball. And then Aramis Garcia in the Giants system. Catching prospects. This is an interesting group because there are a lot of question marks here, but there's a lot of really high ceiling here.
Yeah, and the first thing that jumped out to me, I think, is that Wilson Contreras got bumped up so high. I mean, I don't think he was really considered a top 10 prospect at the catching position coming into this year. Obviously tore it up at Tennessee, 333 average, OBP above 400, 891 OPS. Became a really, really interesting bat in the Cubs system, and feels like he could be almost not a missing piece as far as the Cubs go, but they just have so much young talent at all the other positions. I think he's now the young talent at the catcher position. It seems like they moved away, obviously, from Kyle Schwarber necessarily having a near-term future at catcher. So Wilson Contreras could be just another strong piece for the Cubs going forward, and shows you why they're willing to make the splash for Jason Hayward. Because I think they just know that they're not going to be paying that much money for their really, really high-end young talent going forward, that they can go splash and sign the best position player available. So Contreras, seeing him at the top here is really interesting. Another interesting thing for me is that the Pirates have 2 of the top 6 guys here, in Reese McGuire and Elias Diaz. Both guys are defensive first. Diaz played in a couple of games of the Pirates last year. Is going to be behind Francisco Cervelli this year, who's obviously a good defensive catcher in his own right in the Pirate system. So both of those guys will be given time to develop. For Diaz, he's 25 years old, just turned 25 in November. So clock's taking a little bit for him, but if he can be a solid bat, I don't know if he's going to squeeze Cervelli out of the lineup, but he will certainly be a interesting backup option for them, specifically defensively. I don't think they'll have much to worry about there. So if you're a Pirates fan, you must really, really like this list, I would imagine.
The two guys who stand out to me maybe are because of those injury question marks. Jorge Alfaro, I think, is going to be fine. Ankle surgery in June, that kind of took his 2015 season off track, but one of the best all-around catching talents in baseball, and I think had he played a full season, maybe he's number 2 or number 1 on this list. He comes out of Colombia, was signed by the Rangers in 2010, and has really come a long way since he debuted. I remember when the Rangers signed him, it was one of those things where it was like, yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit because the tools are all there, but there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think still to a certain extent, he's raw in some areas, especially defensively, but there's so much talent there. There's so much potential there that it's almost like you just have to wait for the mental ability to catch up to the physical talent. It's like the technology catching up. When what's his face who made Titanic, when he made Avatar, James Cameron. He talked about how he always wanted to make the movie Avatar, but he had to wait for the technology of animation to catch up. I always remember that interview, hearing about that and thinking, that's insane. But I think that applies to a lot of really athletic guys. You almost have to wait for that side of your persona to catch up to your physical talent. I don't know if that makes any sense. Does that make any sense, Sam?
It makes sense, but
I'm just making stuff up.
No, that what you say makes sense. I don't believe James Cameron. But that's a story for a different podcast.
Oh, okay, that's true.
It definitely makes sense. Like, there's certain things that need to catch up to others. And with Alfaro, I think that's certainly the case. We'll see if the Phillies bought him at the right time. Maybe they bought kind of low on him, and the Rangers saw something they didn't like from him, namely the injuries last year. The Phillies are going to have to build up their own system, and that's what they're trying to do. And maybe he's the catcher of the future. I kind of wrote about that a little bit in NL East projections last week. Their catching options right now don't really seem anything more than just placeholders. So they would love for Alfaro to go and just run and take that job this year as part of what should be a very, very fun and interesting Lehigh Valley team.
He was in the Cole Hamels trade, of course, and the other guy who really stands out to me is Max Pentecost. And I think the reason, again, is because of really his absence so far from professional baseball and the question marks that surround him as to what he's going to look like when he gets back on a field regularly. He was the 11th overall pick out of Kennesaw State back in 2014 by the Blue Jays. But since then, he's only played in 25 games. All of them were in that debut season in 2014. They're really, really good 25 games. He played for rookie-level Bluefield and then Class A short season Vancouver in the Northwest League. Batted /line 324, 330, 419. Really good numbers, but that's all we've seen from him. He had surgery to repair a partially torn right labrum in October of that year, had a cleanup procedure last spring of 2015, which wiped out his entire 2015 season. So we're really going on, 1.5 seasons professionally. This will be his second full season in pro ball, and we really don't know what to expect from Max Pentecost. In addition to that, labrum surgery, shoulder surgery is nothing to sneeze at. How that affects him as a receiver, as a guy who can block and can bounce up and make quick throws, what it means for his arm strength trying to cut down runners, that all remains to be seen. So that definitely, the athleticism and the potential certainly land him on this list, but we don't know what the Blue Jays have in Max Pentecost yet, which is, I think, on the one hand, it's exciting because maybe we're finally going to see that in 2016. On the other hand, I think people are probably a little bit apprehensive about that.
Yeah, and that's what leads him to number 9 as opposed to jumping over Dom Nunez or Jacob Nottingham. The ceiling is so high, but the question marks are also so big, and that's drags him to the bottom of the list. But that's why they make these, and we'll see if he has the chance to climb up it and move past some of these guys this year.
Nunez, a converted infielder. I know the Rockies are really, really high on him. Jacob Nottingham now with the A's. We had a Q&A with him on the site that Kelsie did. Again, as I mentioned, you can check that out at MILB.com as well. And speaking of Kelsie Heneghan, that's next. Another really good piece that went up on the site this week. Actually went up today. We're recording on Thursday. You're probably hearing this on Friday or over the weekend. Chris Devenski in the Houston Astros system, the number 16 ranked prospect in that talent-laden organization. Really interesting story about his baseball upbringing, his relationship with his father, growing up in not the easiest, not the sweetest locales as a kid, but what got him through was baseball. And now on the doorstep of the major leagues, and we'll hear from Kelsie on her story on Chris Devenski coming up next. Well, we are kind of past the postseason slate of content that we put together for MILB.com. We're past Organization All-Stars and, naming some of our top performers of the year. And this is one of my favorite times of the year because we get to dive into stories, which is really cool. And Kelsie Heneghan joins us, one of our writers on the site, one of our best writers on the site, as everyone is. And this is a really cool story. Kelsie, you got to talk to Chris Devenski, who is the number 16 prospect in the Houston Astros organization. First of all, welcome back to the show. I think you're one of our first-time returning writers.
All right, I'll take it. Yeah. I was on right after I left El Paso, and now I'm back talking about another Astro.
Which is very cool because that kind of ties into where this story for Chris Devenski ends up. So let's talk about that here in a few, but kind of just give me the, obviously you got to sort of bear witness to the culmination of this story in 2015 for Chris, but his story is crazy, and especially the way last season went. But take us through kind of, how this story all came together and what made you want to cover Chris and tell his story.
Yeah, it actually kind of begins at the end, like you said. When I was in El Paso for the AAA National Championship, I met Chris because he was the starting pitcher, and I talked to him a little bit. He's a very interesting, pensive guy, and definitely you could tell, like, when he's just staring off, that he's really thinking about something. And just when I was talking to him, I was asking about what it was like to pitch in that game and to do so well. And he was just talking about all that he's had to overcome, and I was really curious about that. Obviously, I didn't have time to dive into that right after the game and everything, but I kept kind of coming back to this idea of like how much he's had to overcome, and I'm sure there's a lot of players who have stories similar to Chris. And so when it became now, like you said, feature time of the off season, I decided to go back to Chris and talk to him and kind of really dive into his story, and it was even more incredible than I could have imagined.
Chris, coming out of high school, ended up playing as a two-way player at Golden West Junior College in Huntington Beach, California. Then he transfers to Cal State Fullerton. But his background is not – he's not one of the guys who you look at as, California kid, probably grew up pretty well off, went to a really good high school and all that kind of thing. He's definitely a much different story than a lot of those guys that we hear about.
Right, especially as like he's from Orange County, you have the perception of a TV show or anything like that. But He's from Santa Ana, which in his area, which he said is a really tough area that he grew up in, and there was a lot of stuff like gangs and drugs that were just around him. And he even said it himself, it was like calling him every day. But the one thing that kind of kept him straight was baseball. It wasn't just that he liked the sport or he wanted to just be involved. It was that it really kept him on the straight and narrow.
So for a kid like that, grow up, and actually as a kid he used to go to games at Cal State Fullerton, and then later on he's playing in that program, which is one of the most hallowed programs in all of college baseball. Gets drafted by the White Sox. He's eventually shipped in a trade to the Astros. But when you look at his numbers early on in his minor league career, I mean, you could tell that he was a guy really struggling to find his way, and it seems like things really all turned a corner for him in 2013. Really, really struggled with Class A Advanced Lancaster, gets sent down to Quad Cities full season Class A. And at that point, you're looking at a guy who, I mean, by no stretch is an old guy, but at 22, 23 years old, you're getting a little old for that Midwest League level. And then all of a sudden, it seems like something clicked. What was the big change for him when he really started to get things figured out, especially into 2014?
Yeah, I think that how bad he did, I guess, in 2013, he said it really lit a fire in him and really just made everything just kind of click for him. He just was driven to never have that terrible feeling of having an 8 ERA or being demoted again. And he just fought back like he had done when he was a kid. And it was also just on the baseball side of things, it was his fastball command that began to click for him. He's always had a good changeup. I think his coach, Rodney Linares, referred to it as a Bugs Bunny changeup.
Yeah.
It just is so slow and you just keep missing it. But so the fastball command was the thing that really needed to click for him, and it finally did come together.
One of the neat things, too, is the relationship that Chris has with his father, Mike, and that's kind of threaded throughout your story, which, again, is up on MILB.com right now. And Mike is, as so many fathers are, one of the big influences, obviously, on Chris in terms of, his love of baseball and all that kind of stuff. But you can tell also his work ethic. And Rodney Linares, who was his manager with Class A Advanced Lancaster and then later with AA Corpus Christi, said is one of the hardest workers I've ever had as a pitcher. And I think a lot of that, you can tell throughout the story, is due to his father, his relationship with his father. He used to go to work and help his father out with his work at a moving company. What was that like, getting a chance to talk to, both Chris and his dad about their relationship?
Yeah, it was great. Just talking to Chris, he kept going back to his dad and bringing up that his ties to helping his dad with his moving company really helped to learn about having a work ethic and getting your hands dirty. So I was just like, hey, can I talk to your dad? And he's like, yeah, of course, but let me warn you, he's pretty chatty, which I thought was funny because Chris is pretty chatty, in a good way, of course. So I got Mike on the phone, and he was just, so happy to talk about Chris and all their times together in the batting cages and in the moving vans. Together, they went to New York to do some moving and moving furniture back to California, and so they definitely have a pretty special bond together.
2013, really big struggle. Chris's numbers at Class A Advanced Lancaster, 4-2, 7.88 ERA. Goes down to Quad Cities, improves a little bit, but definitely not a season that you look back on as one of the highlights of your career. 2014 is when it really all turns around. Combined between Class A Advanced Lancaster and AA Corpus Christi, goes 10-8, 4.04 ERA. And then 2015 is the breakout season. And this year, it seems like pretty much every time somebody was doing something big on the mound from Corpus Christi, I mean, for us as writers, I mean, we monitor these leagues, and it seemed like whenever Corpus Christi was getting a good performance, you knew it was probably from Chris Devenski. And he leads that team into the postseason. Overall number is 7-4, 3.01 ERA. But the playoffs are when things get really crazy for him. And not just with Corpus Christi, but kind of take us through his road from the end of the regular season. He's Corpus Christi's pitcher of the year, into the playoffs, and then beyond.
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, towards the end of the season, he started to get tired, and he was like 3 outings in a row that he gave up like 6 or 7 runs, and so he took a little break, skipped a couple starts, and then he was just refreshed. And I think you could see that in the playoffs, obviously starting in Midland, where his parents came to that game. They, give 2 runs in 6 innings to give them the win. Of course, they didn't go on to win the series, but he thought that his time was over. He thought the year was done. He said goodbye to all of his teammates, and then he gets the call to go to AAA, which obviously was an exciting moment for him and his family. And then once he gets up there, he's a reliever. Obviously, he's a new guy, so he's not going to get the ball necessarily right away. But as a reliever, he pitches like 2 scoreless innings, and so that's going pretty well. And then it gets to the AAA National Championship, the biggest stage, and he's just thinking, all right, maybe I'll be a reliever again. Who knows? And then Straley gets called up to Houston, and Chris gets the ball. And what he does after that was just amazing. I was there, and I still find it hard to believe, flirting with a no-hitter, or a perfect game, actually, carrying it through 6 innings.
And for a kid like that, I mean, it's so weird. It's not Raul Mondesi making his major league debut in the World Series, but it is so strange for somebody, especially at the end of a minor league season, to be promoted to a different minor league level. And it really could only happen in this circumstance, going AA to AAA, because of the AAA championship game and things going a little bit longer in the AAA season. But when you got a chance to talk to him now versus talking to him back in September, what do you think his perception about that whole kind of final weird epilogue, I guess, of the season, not even necessarily the last chapter, it was like after the last chapter, how do you think he views that now? And especially with knowing, that Fresno is probably on the docket for him this year, how huge is that experience for him?
Right, huge. Like you said, it happened so fast. He didn't really get a chance to fully, understand what was going on at the time, but now that he looks back, he still is in awe of how great of an experience it was, and he got that opportunity. But of course, he is a hard worker. He knows that he does deserve to pitch at a high level, and now he's with Fresno, most likely to start the season. He's going to big league camp, and he's just starting to think about the Astros in Houston. And what he really likes about Houston is they kind of have that hard-working mentality that he has, that, they haven't always been highly touted in the past few years, but here they are scrapping to fighting their way, and they're making it to the playoffs just like he did.
This story is a really good one. It's up on MILB.com right now. Kelsie Heneghan, one of our fantastic writers, who you can follow on Twitter, by the way, at Kelsie, KELSIE _Heneghan, HENEGHAN. I would also give you Chris Devenski's Twitter handle, but he's one of those guys who has like 19 of the same exact letters. So I'm sure if you search Chris Devenski, it'll come up for you. But it's Devo, but it's spelled out with like 9 different E's and O's and all that. Kelsie, like we were talking about, this is kind of one of our favorite times of year because we get to be sort of creative and break outside of the standard game stories or organization all-stars or whatever. What's some of the other stuff you got coming up? You don't have to tease everything because I know sometimes stories, don't come together or you don't want to necessarily put them out there yet, but what else do you got coming up?
One of the things I'm most fascinated about right now are the Phillies, so especially Mark Appel and what they're doing right now, because obviously when you look at the Phillies, they haven't necessarily had the biggest prospects of the past couple of years, but they've made a few big trades at the deadline and in the off season, so I'm really intrigued with that. So I think that's the biggest thing I'm looking towards this off season. But like you said, it's a good time to just dig back into those stories that we kind of get a glimpse of during the regular season.
Kelsie Heneghan on Twitter at Kelsie_Heneghan, and one of our really, really good features to get 2016 started. This is a great story. Go check it out on the site. Kelsie, thanks. We'll do it again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Again, you can follow Kelsie on Twitter. She's at Kelsie_Heneghan, and a big thanks to her for joining us. That story on Chris Devenski is up on the site right now. And again, this is such a fun time of year for us because we get to tackle a lot of really, really cool stuff, feature stories and player profiles and prospect Q&As and historical things. And I like this time of year. That's the thing that saves the January and February doldrums. Is like, well, at least we get to write about fun stuff.
That's one way to do it. It's so much more fun to just to dig into things.
Yeah.
In terms of the season, games happen every day. There's new things happening all the time, which is obviously exciting in itself. But now you get to just dig so much deeper into guys' stories, into their backgrounds, and get them for a little longer than just 10 minutes after a game. You get them for 15, 20 minutes and get them to be much more open about what they're doing and what their past is like, what their future will be like, that kind of stuff.
No Benjamin Hill this week, so Ben's Cal Ripken-esque streak of appearances on the Show Before the Show podcast comes to a close. I believe that was the longest of any guest in minor league baseball podcasting history. So Ben now will raise the jersey to the rafters, and we'll see if he can beat it his next time through on consecutive appearances. But no, we will have Ben back next week. There was some news. We've updated you from week to week on the Hartford Yard Goats ballpark situation. It looks as if now the Yard Goats will be on the road until the end of May. That's the latest news today. According to a report by the Hartford Courant, a plan unveiled by new Hartford Mayor Luke Bronin says that the ballpark's target home opener will be May 31st. So, kind of places it into what we've seen over the last couple of seasons with teams that have been waiting for ballparks to get finished. The El Paso Chihuahuas in 2014, they didn't open at home until April 28th. Last year was the Biloxi Shuckers. They didn't get to go home until June. So this seems pretty well in line with that. Just going to be a long first couple of months for the Yard Goats to get the season started.
Yeah, and that's just going to push back, the anticipation of, people in Hartford who had been long waiting for this. Well, not long waiting, but, waiting with high anticipation for this to finally come. At least now we kind of have a solid date. There's still, this isn't necessarily set in stone yet. Every verb we have to kind of use with this is like may, might, that kind of thing. Still some hoops that it need to jump through and to make this happen, but now we have a little bit more of a solid plan than what we had previously discussed on the podcast. And like you said, this is just kind of becoming business as normal. It seems like when teams are building new ballparks in the last couple of years.
As it looks like right now, that would push the Yard Goats to 28 home dates missed to start the season. But from then on, they're going to backload the schedule with home games, as we discussed last week with Ben. So that's about it. I think that's it for episode number 42 of the Show Before the Show. Do we miss anything? Do we miss anything other than Ben? And we do miss Ben.
We miss Ben even when we don't do the podcast. Like we miss Ben on Saturdays and Sundays, and just so we miss Ben now. We will miss Ben going
miss
forward.
You, Ben.
Until next week.
Next week we'll be, sort of back to normalcy. Sam will still be fighting the cause of freedom and justice in the American way on grand jury duty. You didn't even get jury duty. Now you could say you had grand jury duty.
Grand jury
That's
duty.
cool.
Yeah, that's not an adjective to describe the type of jury duty. It's more the duty of the grand jury, just for you people at home keeping score. And I hope you're not keeping score of my jury duty at home during this podcast.
If you are, you really need a life. This is really, it's like the show before the show after dark, though. It's 9:30 out there. I feel like you got to get to sleep. Big day tomorrow with the grand jury, Sam. Like, we have to, like,
yeah, I know.
I
dress nice. I go in button-down shirts. I wear nice pants. I try to, like, represent myself well at these things.
Has anybody come up to you and said, didn't I see you on MLB Network a couple weeks ago?
No, nobody has. It's actually been interesting. Nobody knows anything about anybody.
That's
so
cool.
we're all trying to learn each other, in the grand jury itself. We keep threatening to play a game of where we're going to guess each other's occupations, but it hasn't happened.
So go follow Sam on Twitter for the latest and greatest from New York City grand jury proceedings. No, he's not allowed to talk about it, as we already heard. Nope. But really, go follow Sam on Twitter. He's at Sam Dykstra, MILB. I am at Tyler Maughan. Minor League Baseball is at MILB. And you can find the podcast on iTunes and on the site where you can discover RSS feeds, all of our past episodes archived, and everything else you could want. Rate, review, and subscribe to us wherever you are. And that'll do it for this week's edition of the show. 1 week closer to baseball, everybody. And until next week, more top 10 lists coming out from MLB Pipeline. We got a lot more feature stuff on the way to the site, so enjoy it all, and we'll talk to you then.